Friends, Hormuz will tame Israel, Netanyahu, the GCC countries, and the US. That is Trump. In a previous video, I had explained why Trump is so eager to settle this Iran war and has given such good terms to Iran. He said it himself. He doesn't want to be the next Herbert Hoover who causes the next Great Depression and stock market crash like in 1929. He also wants oil to come down quickly so that the affordability crisis, which led to Biden's defeat and Trump's victory, doesn't haunt him in the coming midterms in November. In fact, if he loses those midterm elections, that is, if the Republican Party loses it, then not only will Trump become a lame duck president for the remaining 2 years of his term, but the Democrats might open a range of investigations against him, especially those relating to him and his family's corruption, and these could cause him a serious headache. So he'll try his best to politically and legally survive. But currently, this is clashing with Netanyahu's own survival because elections are due in Israel as well in October, November. And the Israeli public is now so violent and bloodthirsty that the fact that he hasn't completely obliterated Iran and created a failed state there, like in Gaza or like in Syria, is being held against Netanyahu. And that is why, as I had said in my previous videos, that I have visited Israel, I've seen the public opinion, and Netanyahu is not on the right. He's very much a centrist because the main opposition challengers, who are supposed to be from the center, people like Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid, are criticizing Netanyahu for not having completely destroyed Iran. In fact, there is wild criticism against Netanyahu for slowing down the pace of destruction of Lebanon by both the public and the main opposition. Therefore, whoever will replace Netanyahu will be equally violent and aggressive by tendency. They can only be tamed by one thing, and that is Iran's absolute and total control over Hormuz and the flow of oil and natural gas and fertilizers through that strait. Iran can stop that flow at the drop of a hat. And that is why not only did Trump agree to most of Iran's conditions, at least so far in the interim deal, but this is the precise reason that he has been openly insulting and criticizing Israel and Netanyahu, saying that Israel owes its existence to the United States, which is exactly and entirely true also. And in private conversations, he has been far more ugly. Reports have emerged, but Trump has himself acknowledged that he called him fucking crazy and an ungrateful wretch for continuing to massacre the Lebanese even after Trump agreed to a ceasefire in Lebanon itself.
I was a little bit perturbed at his constantly fighting with Lebanon. At some point I said, maybe we got to stop this.
This is what the MOU that he signed with Iran says. If this condition was unacceptable to Trump, then he would not have signed such an agreement. Therefore, as long as Iran is determined to effectively control Hormuz and it keeps exercising that option, not only will Trump have to meet the demands within that MOU, such as releasing Iran's frozen assets abroad, allowing it to trade oil, and providing that $300 billion investment fund, which makes up for the over $500 billion of damage that Iran has suffered. But the fighting in Lebanon will also be brought to a close. It's not clear what will happen to the occupations that Israel has unleashed. As you know, Israel has occupied a large amount of territory in Syria and completely bombed out Syria's defense forces. Currently occupies over 70% of Gaza, pushing the starving population into an area less than 30%, and continuing its killing and amputation and mutilation of children, women, and double tap strikes on starving people who are waiting for bread in queues, which it has now extended to Lebanon as well, killing even medical personnel who come to help in ambulances in double and triple tap strikes, and encouraging and protecting murderous, rampaging, lynching mobs in West Bank who are occupying larger and larger territories illegally, burning crops, burning olive trees. This brutality, of course, will only end when America stops subsidizing it. As Bernie Sanders had explained in the Senate, that the United States provided $22 billion weapons, political and diplomatic support for the mutilation and killing of children for almost 2 years in Gaza.
They do not want us to continue spending billions of their taxpayer dollars in support of the illegal, horrific, and expansionist war policies of the Netanyahu government in Israel. A recent Quinnipiac poll also found that 60%, including 3/4 of Democrats, 2/3 of independents, and 37% of Republicans. I say that to my Republican colleagues. 37% of Republicans do not want the U.S. sending more military aid to Israel.
But this might happen sooner than you think, because the president reminded Israel that it is not good to abuse and criticize the only powerful country that is still Israel's ally, that is the US. He was angry about the abuse that was being heaped on Trump and the US by Israel's cabinet ministers and by its popular media. In fact, he said, remember that over 2/3 of the weapons that have been used for your defense have been made by American hands and paid by American money, taxpayer money.
Over the last 3 months, 2/3 of the defensive weapons that have protected your homeland have been built by American hands and paid for by American tax dollars. The problem for Israel is not Donald J. Trump. And anybody in Israel who thinks their biggest problem is the President of the United States needs to wake up and smell the reality of the situation that country is in.
But Netanyahu is bound to resist because his survival depends on his showing further aggression, which is what the Israeli public wants in Lebanon, in Iran, in Syria, in Gaza, in West Bank. And so the relationship between Israel and the US will move further and further towards rupture, because Netanyahu will do what is in his own good for his own survival, not for what is in Israel's good, not for what is in Israel's survival interest. And the logic of incentives will similarly drive Trump towards putting more and more pressure on Netanyahu, more and more pressure on Israel, no matter who is in charge, as he repeatedly reminds Israel of how unpopular it is in the world and with the American public, where over 60% of Americans now have an unfavorable opinion of Israel. In fact, in a private call, he told Netanyahu that I saved your fucking ass from jail, because if Netanyahu loses these elections, he too might end up going to jail. There are criminal cases of corruption against him and his wife. Of course, Israel will try to resist, continue its aggression. Netanyahu will continue to do so. They might even try to assassinate Iranian leaders. If they do so and they continue bombing in Lebanon, it will bring blowback from the US as well. And it will not lessen Iran's resolve to control Hormuz. In fact, it might increase Iran's determination. And not only Israel and US, they are of course afraid of Israel, because Israel now does not look at a country's intentions, it only looks at country's capabilities and is determined to destroy the economic and military capabilities of any powerful country. Not just current threat potential from these countries, but even threat in the foreseeable future at all, once they have been stripped of all capabilities. Repeatedly blocking Hormuz whenever it has a disagreement with the US or Israel. And thus the GCC countries need to come to an urgent and quick deal with Iran, either with the US or independent of the US, in order to ensure that their oil and gas, their food supplies and fertilizer supplies, their airports, their and social contract, that is their political stability, can survive, because the political contract and the social stability in these countries cannot do so and will impose taxes, which can lead to not only deep economic depression, but intense political instability and possibly overthrow of some of these monarchies. Therefore, they need to come to a quick arrangement with Iran, give it whatever money it requires for reconstruction, release its frozen funds, and or allow it to charge a toll or a fee on the Hormuz, which is not much. Even at $2 million per ship, it will come to just $1 tax per barrel of oil. And as you know, a barrel of oil is around $80. So it's around 1.2%. That's not a high tax to pay. So Kuwait, UAE, Saudi Arab, Qatar, Bahrain should try to come to a quick arrangement with Iran for their own survival. And the longer they delay this, the more instability they will create at home. And the more desperate Iran becomes, the more aggressive and unpredictable its actions will become. And even a collapse of the government will not help the GCC or the US, because whatever chaos ensues in Iran, and of course, the instability will then spread also to Iraq, to Syria, to Afghanistan, Pakistan, Central Asia, and the GCC countries themselves will regularly be under attack by armed gangs with no central authority, nobody to control them. This will be hundreds of times more chaotic and violent than what we saw under ISIS in Iraq and Syria. And it will be terrible for us countries in Asia and Africa, which are dependent on Middle Eastern oil and gas. It will be a catastrophe for us, especially considering the fact that even our fertilizers, our food production is dependent on these countries of the Middle East. All of us would end up with large scale hunger, massive economic depression, and unemployment, and social chaos, and finally political upheaval. It is possible that Trump, after the November election, if the Republicans are able to retain the House and the Senate, might again try to renegotiate with Iran. But that too won't be successful. And it is highly unlikely that either Netanyahu or Trump will remain as politically powerful as they are. So, friends, if you like and enjoy and find informative my political and economic analysis, please subscribe, share, and like my channel and my videos. And until next time, hasta la vista.